some effective methods of note taking. So here you have one of the most common methods and also one of the most recognized methods, I would say. So this is known as Cornell method, right? Yeah. So this was developed at Cornell University. That is why we call it the Cornell method. So this is again a very systematic note-taking framework. So here, what you can do is you can divide each page into specific sections, right? Yeah. So here it helps you to organize your notes, can be notes, research papers, and specifically here we are looking at lecture notes. To summaries, and summaries specifically which are digestible. So that means things that you can specifically keep inside your brain. It is not just memorizing, but you can just store them inside your brain. Receiving a message. All right, okay. Yes. Okay. So good evening. Right. So here we will just go through this first method. So here, unlike some methods here, you can write everything in one place. You can even use the note as in, your handout that you are referring to, the research paper itself. So you can organize all these, can be the main points and also sub details, study cues, and also the summary. Summary of each page can be written under the page. So that means everything is in just one place. And this is some sort of a very neat process. And also because there is a summary as well, if I'm to show you an image here, right? So here you can see. So there's this section to jot down the summary as well. So that means the summarization process is also done here, not just note taking. So then what happens is it is far more easier to you, right? Yeah. So, because everything is organized and those are summarized, the key points are summarized, it is very convenient to review when you revisit this note. And here, if we just go through the main sections, so first there's this left margin. So we also call it Q column, right? So they are what you jot down. So here, let me highlight it, highlight the part that I'm discussing here. Yeah, first of all, left margin. So there what you can write is you can write the key concepts and also main terms, pivotal terms. So let's say that you may come across several Sanskrit and Pali terms which are specific to your study area. So then you can just jot down those. And also the questions. And what do we mean by questions here? Questions that these notes would provide answers for, right? So this column can become your study guide as it covers the main notes and also it tests whether you can elaborate on these cues. And also, it is very important for cross referencing because let's say that the same term appears in different texts, then it can be somewhat difficult, right? So, then if you want to find out when the same term appears somewhere, so it is very convenient when you have all these things written on your left margin, right? So then it is easier to cross reference. You can easily find that out. And then you have the main area, right? Note taking column. So that's how we call it. So there, here you can see, let me use another color here. Yeah, main area. So there you have the summary of arguments. Not all the arguments, you just take the gist of the arguments. So that means basically the content, right? Content in point forms. And then you have to provide evidence, right? So this would be the largest section where you capture the actual content. So here you see, right? So this part. main points, details, and also with the examples, right? Yeah. So there you can mention the direct quotations with page numbers, and when you write down the direct quotations as examples, you don't have to write the entire quotation. You can just start with the quotation and then put some dots and then just write the page number. Then you know where it directs you, right? Yeah, so those things. And after that, you have the bottom section, right? That part is also important because this would be the entire summary, right? Summary of the entire page. So here also you get a summary of arguments, but that basically refers to the main points, the gist of the article. But this would be a very short summary or a reflection, right? After finishing your notes, you can just write a 2 to 3 sentence summary of the main takeaway. Then you can add your critical reflection. So you can just think of this critically, right? You can reflect on this. You can ask this question from you. How does this connect to other readings? Does it challenge or support other interpretations? And what are the questions that it raises, right? So that means you are engaging in an active manner with the text here, right? And also on the top, you can add all these citations and references as well, right? So what are the points as in you are directed to from this text? You can mention those citations as well. So here I will move to this detailed section, right? Yeah. So as we already discussed, so when we consider the physical layout, the paper is divided into 3 sections. So there is this specific structure, specific margin, but then you don't have to follow it as it is, but this is the technical structure. 2.5 margin to the left, and also the summary, and then the main note section likewise. So here you have it, right? So here the measurements are also given, but you don't have to limit yourselves to those measurements specifically, right? You can just keep the structure in your mind. And also there are several methods. We are discussing several methods. You can select what is most convenient to you. Yeah. So here you can use the main note section for this during class stage. So we call this 3-stage workflow, right? So here when you are attending the lecture, when you are recording the lecture content, so here I'm not referring to audio recording. You are recording it from your brain, right? When you are recording lecture content and when you are coming up with arguments and when you are presenting the evidence that you took from the text, you can write freely, right? Focus on capturing information rather than perfect organization. So, in your study area, there can be several textual passages, philosophical arguments, and also scholarly interpretations. All these things can be there. So, that would be the main part. So, here, let me use the annotate tool, this part, right? So, there you can see. And yes, so after that, you have the review section, right? This part. Yeah. So the left side, we call it left Q column. So shortly after class, so ideally the same day, you can review your notes and extract key elements for the left margin. So for instance, as we already discussed, can be key terms, right? And also prompts and questions, and also the main concepts which kind of organize the material. And also something else that you can do here is you can include memory triggers. So what do we identify as memory triggers? Any idea? Going by the term, what do we mean by memory triggers, specifically in the context of a lecture? Because what you are doing here is you are just taking down the lecture notes. So here specifically memory triggers, that word means words that help you recall larger sections, right? So whenever you see that word, you would remember, right? What are the main points related to this specific key term? Likewise. So this transforms your notes into a self-testing tool, right? So you are able to cover the main section. You can elaborate based on the cues. That's it. And then after that, you have the summary here, right? So it is more or less like a synthesis of information. And as we already discussed here as well. So you are writing a summary of your notes, right? And that would be just, like 2 to 3 sentences or 2 to 4 sentences. What you have to do is you have to capture the essential takeaway, right? You have to answer your questions, the questions that you had at the beginning. So just answer this question. What was this lecture or reading if you are doing this with a research paper or a book, right? Whatever the text that you are referring to. If it is a lecture, if it is a research paper, whatever, you can ask this question. What was this about? What was this fundamentally about? Then you can write that answer as a summary, answer to that question as a summary at the end of your note, right? Yeah, so that is why we specify this fact here. So that is where you highlight the main points. It is true that you are using this space to jot down the main points. That is true. But here you get a synthesis of information, right? A specific information. That is why it is very significant. So that's it about this Carnell method. Any questions about it before we move to the other part, other section? You can either unmute or send messages via the chat box. If not, as we have only 1 hour today for this online session, we will move to the next method. Yeah, okay. So here the next method that we have here is mapping method. So I'm pretty sure that all of you have heard of this term mind mapping, and most of you might have done it as well, mind mapping, and also it is called concept mapping. So generally we call it the mapping method. So this is specifically a visual structure. So it is very much useful, very much convenient for visual learners. Specifically, if you do not find it very convenient to study from notes, right? So some people like to study the note itself, but some people do not. They need visual cues, right? Specifically, the visual learners, because there are different types of learners. Specifically for visual learners, it is better if they have kind of a visual structure instead of conventional notes. So here, what you can do is you can create a hierarchical diagram that visually represents how ideas connect, right? So here you have this image, right? So here you can see a hierarchical diagram. So it visually represents the points. So this would be kind of a spatial representation of knowledge, the knowledge that you have gathered. So the concepts are physically linked to each other. So when you build a map like this, right? So you have to start with the central topic, right? So that is very important because you are connecting the points here. You need to start with the central or the pivotal or the predominant key topic. So you have to write the main concept in the center of the page. So here you can see, right? Main topic in the center at the top, right? So if we just consider an example, Four Noble Truths, right? So that would be the main topic. And then you have to branch out, right? Create main branches, so subtopics. So you can draw lines radiating outwards from the center. So this is the center. The lines are radiating outward. So each line should represent a major subdivision. So if we follow the same example, Four Noble Truths, you can have four main branches like dukkha, suffering, samudaya, origin, nirodha, and then also magga, the path. Right? Likewise, you need to map out. And then what you can do is you can add details to each branch. So here you can see. So subsections are here. So here in the example, you have only two, but from the example that we discussed, if you take that example, you can have four. Likewise, you can have subtopics that you find to be convenient and also which are necessary to you. And after that, as the next section, what you can do is you can add key details. You can add details to each branch. From each subtopic, you can create smaller branches for supporting details. And also there can be examples, there can be related concepts, right? So for example, if we consider the term dukkha, suffering, right? You can branch it to physical suffering and psychological suffering. Likewise, right? So here, likewise, you can continue branching outward. So that means you can keep adding layers of detail as far as needed. Each level can get more specific. Here you can use different colors. That day also we discussed about color coding, right? Using different colors for different sections. For main arguments, you can use green. For examples, you can use yellow. And for evidence, you can use red. And also let's say for the citations you can use blue. Likewise you can use different colors and also different symbols as well. So here you can see different shapes are used, round shapes and also squares. Likewise you can use different shapes, different symbols and also different line styles as well. So here you can see, right? So you can develop this according to your convenience, right? Yeah. So here, this method specifically, right? It is significant as in it works better for visual learners because this spatial arrangement creates a mental picture which is easier to recall. So here, so I have just included the same idea, might not be in the same words that I use to verbally explain, but here, about beginning with the main topic and branching off and also titling the other subtopics and also not taking and continuing the pattern. So those things are there. But when you look at this text, it is kind of boring, right? But this is not like that. Not only for the visual learners, I would say. For anyone, this can be convenient, right? Because our brains kind of tend to recall visual details, right? The mental pictures rather than all these texts, right? Written texts. So you remember where concepts were on the page, even when you revisit it from your memory, right? So you remember how they were connected visually. And also another very significant point that you can identify in this method is it shows relationships, right? So mapping naturally reveals how concepts interconnect. You can draw connecting lines between branches like this to show relationships, right? Likewise. And also, on the other hand, it reflects hierarchical thinking as well because we are using a hierarchical diagram here. Because specifically when it comes to a study area like Buddhist philosophy, right? So it usually works with nested categories. So many sections are numbered, even the example that we took, right? So this idea of Four Noble Truths, right? So that can be branched out. Likewise, most of the concepts. So here, when you consider the mapping method, right, it mirrors this structure naturally. And also, this is very useful for taxonomies in the sense classification systems. If you consider Abhidharma text, right, so you get classification systems, so things can be divided according to the number. And also this is important for comparative studies specifically. So even during the last session we were going through a comparative study, right? So there you can create parallel branch showing how different schools treat the same concept. Let's take Mahayana tradition, Theravada tradition, and Vajrayana tradition, right? So you can show it very clearly. And also, if we consider the text structure, so it visualizes how something is organized. Specifically, if we consider a sutra, how a specific sutra is organized, it shows, right? Yeah. And also, if there's a debate about a concept, then you can present the arguments as well as counter arguments. And also, you can come up with the responses and all these, right? So, it is very convenient in that way. But also, there can be some limitations. So, what do you think are the limitations of this specific method? So, up to now, we were talking about the advantages of this method. What can be some limitations?
Yeah, there is no space for you to write down your comments or arguments. I think in this method.
Exactly, Reverend. Yeah, I do agree. So that would be the main issue here. Because if you need to write down extensive quotes or citations, right? So detailed evidence, you have no space. So this is best for conceptual overview. This is good to see the big picture. But if you want to provide details, right? So this is not good for detailed textual work. But the Cornell method, right? So here, this is good for this detailed textual stuff. So then you can do it. And also some students, some research students use combined methods. So you can use mapping for conceptual understanding to look at the big picture and Cornell for detailed textual work. So that can be done as well. So if you have no questions about these two methods, Cornell method and mapping method, then we can move to the next method, which is the outlining method. Right. Seems there are no questions, and yeah, we have around 30 minutes more, so we will continue. So, the outlining method. So, here again, this is a very systematic system, and also if you want to neatly organize your notes, then this would be one of the best methods for you. So, here what happens is this method uses a systematic indentation system, right? So, here you can see. So, indentation is used. So, there's a space from the main topic to the subtopic, and also indentation is used here as well, right? So key points have indentation than the subtopic. Likewise, there you can see. So here again, you can show relationships between ideas, right? According to the order of importance, I would say specifically. So each level of indentation that you have here, that represents a more specific or a subordinate concept. So here you can see that it creates a very clear hierarchy. So there is a hierarchical structure. So here also you saw a hierarchical diagram, but this one is more organized than it. right? Even this hierarchical diagram, because this is a hierarchical structure that you have here. So here you have a very clear, very lucid hierarchy from general to specific. So the general one would be the main topic, right? The key topic. And then subtopics are specific in a further level. And then indentation is used to talk about the key points further, right? So here, usually the main topic is considered as the level 1. So main topic, so it is usually in the left side. And here you can use bullet points, or else you can use Roman numerals, right? Whatever the numeral system that you are using, you can use. So the main topic would be the broadest category that you have here. So there you can use a single bullet point, a larger bullet point, or else numerals. And then after that, subtopics are provided, and those are indented just once, right? So here you can see subtopic 1, subtopic 2, likewise. So here what you can do is you can use sub bullets, and you know that when you are using Word and all these other Microsoft softwares that you are using, these things are automatically generated. Sub bullet points are automatically generated. Even if you are doing this manually, right? You can just draw the bullet points. So intended ones and then sub bullets. So capital letters can be used like ABC, right? Capital ABC. So these would be the major divisions of the main topic, right? Yeah. So that would be the second level. That means subtopic 1, subtopic 2. After that, you have the next level, right? So there you have supporting details, and that level is indented twice, right? So here you can use again, further indented bullets, sub bullets, further intended sub bullets. So here you can number them, right? And or else you can, as I already mentioned, you can use sub bullets. So specific factors and also definitions, examples, these things can be mentioned under that point. So here you can see as key points, right? So if you want to further specify, what you can do is you can have another bullet point, right? Or else you can use lowercase letters, simple ABC, likewise, right? So then you can provide even more, as in even more information, even more data that you want to provide, right? Yeah. So here you can add subtopics as they emerge, right? So when let's say the lecturer or the instructor shifts to a new major point, you can indent and create a level 2 entry. So this also captures all the details. You can add facts, definitions, examples, quotes, right? And also this is very important to maintain consistency, because when you consider each indentation level, so each level should represent the same type of information throughout your notes. So you cannot mix hierarchies in an arbitrary way. So it is up to you, as in otherwise then it would not be very organized if you do so. So you have to be on alert when you are doing something like this. So this is good for the clarity of organization, because again this is something visual. This is kind of appealing for the visual learners as well. So this visual hierarchy makes it very much obvious, so as in how ideas relate to each other. So you can just at a glance see how two truths framework, or just, if you consider Shunyata doctrine or something, you can just consider. So even if you refer to Tripitaka, right, when you are referring to different subtopics, different Pitakas likewise, then you have a very clear picture. And also this works for complex material. When you have nested logical structures, right? So then it is easier for you when you use this outlining method, you have everything organized properly. And this is specifically useful in Buddhist studies because there are historical developments and also chronological progressions, textual structures, as we discussed earlier, organization of sutras, likewise, and also even for term definitions, if you need to understand the main terms, and also etymology, the technical meaning, and also the examples, those things can be provided like that. And what can be a limitation of this method? A limitation, no limitations. Because everything would not be very rigid, right? So this is a very rigid structure, I would say, very neat. But when you engage in postgraduate level research, everything does not turn out to be neat, right? Not all the texts follow neat hierarchical structures. If you are going to capture complex interconnections between topics, right, then it is not very convenient here. Then, of course, you can use mapping. Then you can just, draw connections between different points. You can just use arrows likewise, right? So this requires the instructor or the research text that you are referring to present materials in a somewhat organized fashion. So chaotic discussions or chaotic details, and I'm not saying that chaotic discussions are bad, because sometimes for some research areas you have to engage in a chaotic discussion. You cannot always follow a strictly rigidly organized structure, right? Yeah, so there you can see. And yeah, if there are no questions, we can move to the charting method. Right. Yeah. So here this one is also called the table method. Let me show you. Yeah, so here you can see, right? So this is called the table method, and also here you can see a grid structure. So here what you can do is you can create a table with columns representing different categories or aspects that you are tracking, and rows can represent individual items, as you can see here, individual topics. So here again, this is very easy when you are doing a comparative analysis. So this allows easy comparison. So it is easy to organize information like this. And you can even set this up before class. You can just draw some vertical lines to create columns across your page and label each column with a category which is relevant to your subject matter. And at the during class stage or during reading stage, when a new topic or example is introduced, you can create a new row, right? You can fill in the relevant information under each column heading for that topic. And also, if some information is not provided, then you can just, and also you can say that if something is not relevant, you can just leave cells blank and you can continue row by row, right? So this is again important if you are just, comparing different schools, let's say, yoga, Shra, or Theravada, likewise, if you are using different ones, if you are referring to Pali Canon, right? So likewise, and also if you want to refer to the geographic origin, so then you can have different columns like this. So it is easy, as you can see here, when those things are labeled by the category. So when you jot down the information, it is easier for you to track technical terms, right? Because everything would be mentioned there. And also to analyze arguments, compare textual interpretations, because literally you get a side by side comparison here. Perfect for comparative work. You can scan horizontally across the row, right, to see or if all the aspects are there related to one topic. And also you can scan it vertically down a column to compare how different topics have been addressed. And also this is very important to identify gaps, because when you come across an empty cell, then that suggests a gap. So that means what information you are missing, right? Yeah. So again, this cannot be suitable for very complex arguments, right? So some arguments cannot be reduced to brief entries, right? So in such instances, it can be somewhat difficult for dense textual analysis. And also, if there's material that doesn't naturally fit in comparative categories, again, it can be somewhat difficult. So if you are using this charting method, it is very convenient if you have a lot of facts to review, right? Lot of details, but again, that can be organized like this. So here, some of the tips that you can use here would be to leave space. If your grid or if your table is very small, then you don't have enough space to put your data, right? So because of that, you can make columns wide enough when you draw this. So when you create this using some sort of a software. And also another important thing that you can use is, another tip would be to use color coding. You can use different highlighters to mark patterns across rows and columns, right? And also, if you are using digital highlighting, that is also convenient. And also, you can use programs like Excel specifically, right? Notion databases, and even in Microsoft Word software, you get all these simple tables. Then you can organize and also reorganize. So those are easier to use than using paper charts in a way as well, right? Yeah. So that would be the charting method. If you have questions, feel free to ask. Yeah. And then we will move to the sentence method, right? Yeah. So here what you can do is, this would be a very simple kind of a linear structure, and this would be the most straightforward note-taking method. So that means you write information as a series of sentences or as brief points. So just jotting down main points, predominant key pivotal points. So when you jot down the main points, that would help you determine which is important and which is not. Which part is important, which part is not important. You can easily guess it then, right? So each line would capture a distinct idea or a fact. And each new piece of information gets its own line here. And this is very simple. So you don't have to stuff your information somewhere. You are just jotting them down. And here what happens is, when you are using this structure, you are able to identify a lot of details. You can actually cover several details and information. And also the process is much speedy, I would say, when you compare and contrast this with the other methods. And also, this kind of needs continuous recording when you are writing down the important points as the instructor presents them, as you encounter them in reading, right? So you usually add one idea per line. So it is not advisable to combine multiple concepts in a single sentence. So it is not about writing exactly the same note using small letters, using very tiny letters, almost invisible. So when people follow this sentence method as a note taking method, so some tend to do that. They tend to just summarize or just write down, right? Even worse, they just write down the same text using smaller letters in a very smaller space. Not like that. So you can do this very simply because here notes should be simplified. That is the main idea here, what you have to do. So here you can say, so if we consider a sentence, if we refer to Nagarjuna, so you can say Nagarjuna founded Madhyamika and criticized inherent existence. So if that would be a sentence, right? So that sentence is somewhat long. What you can do is you can break it down to two sentences. You can say Nagarjuna founded Madhyamika school. So that would be one sentence. And you don't even have to use the word founded. You can just say Nagarjuna hyphen Madhyamika school likewise, school of thought likewise, right? And then you can say Nagarjuna criticized this concept and you can just mention the concept. Or else you don't have to repeat the name Nagarjuna. You can just write CRI, critic, right? So that would be enough. You can either say CRI, you can say CRITIZ, CRITIQUE. Instead of writing the word criticized, you can just write critic dot crit dot cre dot likewise. You get the idea. So this is what is conveyed here, right? So this is what meant here. So you don't have to bother there to write down the entire sentence likewise. And also the headings are optional here, right? When the topic kind of shifts significantly, you can add a heading to mark the new section, but then the headings are not compulsory. You can just, have it as an option, I would say, right? Headings would be optional. So that provides kind of a minimal structure. And also formatting is minimal. No elaborate hierarchies, no indentation system, and not even visual structures, just information captured quickly and clearly, right? So here you can see. So each line on the page can be considered as a novel topic, right? And also, here, not only the teacher, your instructor, even if you are referring to a research paper, you can see you are writing down only the important information, not everything that is there in the text, right? So, usually you can use the point form. So, you can use an entire sentence, that is okay, but again, the sentences have to be somewhat short. If you are using very long sentences, very lengthy sentences, there's no point of note taking actual, right? Then you can just read the text. If you want to do an effective note taking, if you want to engage in an effective note taking, what you can do is you can organize them very properly as point forms, right? Not as sentences. If you want to use a sentence, then what you can do is you can use shorter sentences, right? So there you can, yes, see a picture here like this, right? Or just numbering them, or else you can add bullet points, or else leave a space, and then you are just jotting down the important points. So here, the most important advantage that this thing provides you is the speed. This is the fastest method for capturing large amounts of information. That is why I added it to the end as well, because these can be somewhat complex, right? But here, this one can be very easy, and also this would be the fastest method. So no time would be lost deciding on hierarchy, creating branches, organizing structure. You just write down what is important, merely write down what is significant. And also you can cover extensive material because you are not constrained by structural formats, right? So for fast-paced lectures, dense readings, this would be good. And also this is simple. Simplicity is there. Anyone can start using this without understanding all these organizational systems. And also it is flexible. This would adapt to any lecture style. It can be, utilized in an organized framework, chaotic framework, right? Anything. This would be convenient. And also this is easier to number. You can either number when you are in the during reading stage or during lecture stage, but also you can number later as well. That means later you can number each sentence or point for reference in study guides. That is also possible. But also this again comes with some drawbacks, right? Because when you have this sort of a note taking structure, so this in a way lacks built-in organization. So when you take down your notes, when you take down your notes like this, what would happen is the relationships between ideas are not visually obvious, right? You have to remember or deduce how concepts connect. And also, don't you think it would be very harder to review if you use this structure? Without hierarchy or structure, it is less clear what is more important. Because everything looks equally weighted on the page. Equal weight is given to each point. And also it requires a whole load of post processing. So to study effectively, if you use this type of structure, you likely need to reorganize these notes later. You need to create outlines, right? Flashcards or summary sheets from the raw material. So here you can consider this as raw material if you want kind of a more organized output, I would say, because it can be somewhat overwhelming because pages of sentences can feel dense and intimidating as well when you are reviewing them for exams, right? But this should be better for fast paced lectures, right? For discussions, seminars, and also to go through difficult material, as in if you remember the passes that we discussed, first pass, second pass, third pass, likewise, this can be considered as the first pass through difficult material, right? And to make it more effective, if you are using this method, what you can do is you can add numbering later. And also you can use symbols, right? You can use stars as, like shorthand, stars for important points, question marks for unclear items. To show the relationships, you can draw arrows, right? Likewise, you can do so. And also you can highlight key terms. You can leave spaces. So likewise, you can use such methods here, right? So here the bottom line is it is up to you to decide what is the most convenient method for you, right? Yeah. So now we have around 2 minutes more. If you have any questions, you may let me know. We went through different methods today, the Carnell method and also the mapping method, mind mapping or concept mapping, then the outlining method, charting method or the table method. We can call it the grid method as well, and finally the sentence method. We will do this method and also argument mapping. These things when I meet you Saturday, and then we will move to paragraph writing and then thesis statement developing. And so the gist of the lesson today is it is up to you to decide what is the most convenient method for you personally. If you are a visual learner, so this method would be the best for you. Likewise, you can decide if you would like to follow extensive details, then even the sentence method would be convenient, right? Likewise. And also for different texts and for different lectures, you can utilize different methods. That is also possible, right? Yeah. Okay. So the time is up. If you have no questions, then we can call it a day. Since there are no questions, then we will call it a day. Good night, everyone.
Good night, Miss.
Thank you, teacher.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
teacher.
Good night.